She had a blind date with a cold CEO. Unexpectedly, after kissing her, he couldn't let her go. It all started on a rainy Friday evening. The city lights were dim behind the fog, and in a small cafe on the corner of Fifth Avenue, a woman named Emily sat nervously staring at her reflection in the window. She wasn't used to blind dates. Her friend Lily had set it up, insisting that she needed to meet someone serious, someone who could balance her chaos. What Emily didn't know was that the man walking toward her that night would turn her life upside down. The door opened, a gust of cold wind entered, and with it, him. Alexander Knight. The name alone sounded powerful. He was tall, sharply dressed in a black suit, his expression unreadable. His eyes, cold, calculating, yet strangely captivating, scanned the room until they landed on her. Emily froze. He didn't smile. He didn't even greet her warmly. He just sat down and said in a low, calm tone, "Emily, I presume." From the very beginning, Alexander was distant. He barely looked at her while speaking. Every word he said felt measured, every movement deliberate. Emily, on the other hand, was open, talkative, and warm-hearted. She talked about her art, her dreams of opening a small design studio, and her belief that love wasn't something you planned, it just happened. He listened, his face stoic, though something flickered in his eyes when she smiled. When the date ended, Emily sighed, convinced it was a failure. But as she turned to leave, the waiter slipped on the wet floor and nearly knocked her down. Alexander caught her just in time. Their faces were suddenly inches apart. For a moment, the world stood still, her heartbeat echoed in her ears, and before she could think, she kissed him. It was meant to be a brief, apologetic kiss. But something unexpected happened. The cold CEO, the man everyone said had no emotions, didn't pull away. His hand tightened around her waist. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something real, warmth, connection, life. After that night, he couldn't forget her. He told himself it was just a moment, just attraction. But days turned into weeks, and he found himself thinking about her smile in meetings, her laugh echoing in his head while he worked late in his glass office overlooking the city. He tried to resist, but the more he tried, the more restless he became. Meanwhile, Emily tried to move on. She thought she'd never hear from him again. Until one morning, her phone rang. It was a call from Knight Enterprises, the biggest corporate design client she'd ever dreamed of working for. They wanted her studio to handle their new branding project. When she walked into the boardroom, she froze. Alexander was sitting at the head of the table. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with unspoken tension. "Miss Reed," he said coldly, "let's keep this professional." But Emily could see something behind those cold words, confusion, conflict, and something deeper. Working together was torture. He was demanding, perfectionist, and often distant. Yet, he was also protective, quietly watching out for her when others criticized her work. One night, when they were the last two in the office, she confronted him. "Why do you act like you don't care, when it's obvious you do?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his jaw tightening. "Because caring ruins people like me, Emily. It makes us weak." She stepped closer. "Or maybe it makes you human." That night, the walls he had built around his heart began to crumble. He told her about his past, how he had lost his parents young, how betrayal had made him believe love was a weakness. Emily listened, not with pity, but with understanding. And slowly, he began to open up. But just as they were beginning to find happiness, a scandal hit the company. A rival corporation accused Alexander of fraud, and suddenly the media was everywhere. Investors panicked, board members turned against him, and in the chaos, Emily was blamed for leaking confidential information. Her heart shattered when she saw his reaction. He didn't defend her. He just stared at her with that same cold expression and said, "Leave, Emily. I can't deal with this right now." Tears streamed down her face as she walked away, whispering, "I believed in you, Alexander. For weeks, he buried himself in work, but nothing felt right. The office was empty without her laughter. He realized too late that pushing her away was his biggest mistake. When the truth came out and the real culprit was caught, he knew what he had to do. He searched everywhere until he found her in a small coastal town, painting by the sea. She looked peaceful but broken. He stood behind her silently, then finally said, "You were right, Emily. Caring doesn't make me weak, losing you did." She turned, her eyes filling with tears. "Then why now, Alexander? Why after everything?" He stepped closer, his voice cracking for the first time. "Because I can't breathe without you. You kissed me once and woke something I thought was dead. I didn't know how to love, but you taught me." Emily hesitated, the pain still fresh, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity, not the cold CEO everyone knew, but a man stripped of his armor, desperate to make things right. She forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because her heart still did. They rebuilt their relationship slowly, learning to trust again. He supported her dreams, and she helped him rediscover life beyond money and power. Together, they created something lasting, not just love, but a partnership built on respect, vulnerability, and growth. Years later, at a company gala, reporters asked Alexander about the secret to his success. He looked at Emily across the room and said softly, "Once, I met a woman who showed me that even the coldest hearts can find warmth again. That's my real success." The crowd applauded, but for him, the only thing that mattered was her smile, the same one that had melted his heart years ago, the kiss that changed everything. It had been 2 years since Alexander Knight found Emily again by the sea, 2 years since that moment when he confessed that losing her broke him more than any business failure ever could. Now, their love had matured like fine wine, deeper, calmer, but still burning with the same spark that began on that rainy night in the cafe. Emily had finally opened her dream art studio, Reed and Soul Designs, with Alexander's quiet support behind the scenes. Though he never interfered, she knew he was always there. The man who once built walls around his heart now helped her build a life full of color and warmth. They were happy, but happiness never comes without its tests. One morning, Emily walked into her studio to find chaos. Papers were scattered everywhere, and her assistant looked pale. "Emily, someone broke in. They stole the designs for the Knight project." Her stomach dropped. That project was one of Alexander's company's most confidential campaigns, a design partnership between Knight Enterprises and a major international brand. If the files leaked, it could destroy everything they had both worked for. When Alexander found out, he didn't say a word at first. He just stood in silence, his eyes cold again, the same icy look she remembered from the past. It hurt her more than the break in itself. "You think I had something to do with this, don't you?" she whispered. He turned his back. "I just need to know how this happened, Emily. I can't let my company burn again." That night, she cried silently, feeling the same sting she had years ago when he once doubted her. The pain of being mistrusted by the man she loved resurfaced like an old wound. Days passed in tension. Alexander buried himself in the investigation, while Emily fought to prove her innocence. She found security footage, witness statements, even traced the breach to a rival designer, someone who had once worked under her but was fired for plagiarism. When she presented the evidence to Alexander, he finally looked at her, really looked at her. His voice softened. "You did all this on your own." She crossed her arms, eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "Because I wasn't going to let your doubt destroy us again, Alexander. I love you, but I won't let you make me feel small." The silence between them was heavy. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, his voice breaking. "You're right. I promised I'd never hurt you again. I was scared, Emily. I've fought my whole life to control everything, my company, my emotions, my future. But I can't control what I feel for you. It terrifies me." Her tears finally fell. "Love isn't control, Alexander. It's trust. If you don't trust me, What do we have? That night, something changed in him. He left the office early for the first time in years, went home, and found her on the balcony overlooking the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and whispered, "You're the only thing I've ever been willing to lose control for." They stayed like that for a long time, just breathing in the quiet. But fate wasn't done testing them yet. A few months later, Alexander received devastating news. His estranged father had passed away. The man who abandoned him as a child had left behind not just a will, but also an old company riddled with debt and scandal. The media swarmed again, investors questioned his stability, and whispers began spreading that the emotionally unstable CEO was unfit to lead. The pressure was unbearable. Alexander began to close off again, working late nights, avoiding her calls. Emily watched helplessly as the man she had helped heal slowly drifted back into his darkness. One evening, she walked into his office unannounced. The lights were dim, papers scattered, and Alexander sat at his desk with his head in his hands. "Alexander," she said softly, walking closer, "you don't have to go through this alone." He didn't look up. "You don't understand. Every time I let someone in, they leave, or they hurt me. I can't risk losing you too." She kneeled beside him, took his hand, and pressed it against her heart. "You won't lose me, not unless you push me away again. Let me in, Alexander. Let me be your strength this time." Something in her voice broke through his fear. He pulled her close and finally let go of his pride, his control, his pain. That night, for the first time, Alexander cried in her arms. And in that vulnerability, their love became unbreakable. Months later, together, they rebuilt everything: the company, their trust, their future. Emily's studio flourished, and Alexander launched a new division focused on creative partnerships, giving opportunities to small artists like Emily once was. At the launch event, reporters once again crowded around them. One asked Emily, "What's it like being with a man like Alexander Knight, the cold CEO who changed for love?" She smiled and looked at him lovingly. "He wasn't cold," she said softly. "He was just waiting for the right person to warm his heart." Alexander took her hand, kissed it gently, and said to the crowd, "The truth is, power and money never changed me, she did. Because love isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength I've ever known." The applause was thunderous, but Emily's eyes stayed on him, the man who had once been untouchable, now completely hers. As the lights dimmed and music filled the hall, he leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Remember that first kiss, Emily? I thought it was a mistake. Now I know it was destiny." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "And it's the only mistake I'd make again." They kissed under the glittering lights, no longer a cold CEO and a struggling artist, but two souls who had fought every storm, and found home in each other. When destiny tested their love again, the city was alive with celebration. Knight Enterprises had just been recognized as one of the most successful companies in the country. Cameras flashed, journalists wrote headlines, and everyone was praising Alexander Knight, the once cold, untouchable CEO who had turned his empire into a legacy. Beside him stood Emily, radiant in a soft silver gown, her hand resting proudly in his. They had fought every battle together: love, trust, fear, and now, they finally had peace. Or so they thought. Life has a way of testing love when it's at its strongest. And their test was about to begin. A week after the gala, Emily woke up early to prepare for her art studio's international exhibition, her biggest achievement yet. As she stepped out of the shower, she saw Alexander on the balcony, talking on the phone, his face tense. His voice was low, sharp. "No, I told you, this can't come out. Not now." When he turned and saw her, he quickly ended the call. "Just business," he said. But Emily knew that look, the one he wore when he was hiding something. She didn't press him that morning, but the distance between them began to grow. He became restless, distracted, checking his phone constantly. Late nights returned, his old habits resurfacing. The man who once opened his heart to her seemed to be building walls again. One night, unable to take it anymore, she walked into his office. "Alexander, what's going on? You're shutting me out again." He hesitated, then finally said, "There's something you don't know. The company, it's being investigated. Someone's been leaking private information, and the authorities think it's coming from someone close to me." She stared at him. "Close to you? You think it's me?" "No," he said immediately, walking toward her. "Not you, never you, but I need to protect you, Emily. If this goes public, they'll drag your name into it too." His eyes were filled with worry, not coldness. But Emily was tired of being protected through silence. "We're supposed to face things together, Alexander. Don't shut me out to keep me safe. That's not love, that's fear." He didn't answer. His silence said everything. The next morning, she left the penthouse quietly, a note on his desk: "If you want me beside you, stop hiding behind your fears." Days turned into weeks. She focused on her art, pouring her heartbreak into every canvas. Meanwhile, Alexander's world began to collapse. The investigation revealed a dark truth: someone from inside his own company had been leaking secrets, and the name behind it was shocking: his stepbrother, Damian Knight. Damian had always envied Alexander, his success, his fame, his control. Now, he wanted to destroy everything Alexander built. And to make matters worse, Damian had somehow obtained personal photos of Alexander and Emily, threatening to release them to the media. When the scandal broke, the headlines were merciless. "Cold CEO in secret affair scandal. Love and lies at Knight Enterprises." Emily's art exhibition was overshadowed by the gossip. Her sponsors pulled out, her reputation suffered, and she was left shattered, not because of the lies, but because Alexander still hadn't come to her. That night, she sat alone in her studio, the rain hitting the windows just like it had the night they met. She whispered to herself, maybe our love wasn't built to survive the world he lives in. But just then, the door burst open. Alexander stood there, drenched from the rain, eyes wild with desperation. "Emily," he said, his voice cracking. "I should have come sooner. I was wrong about everything. I thought I could protect you by keeping you out of it, but all I did was hurt you again." She looked at him, tears welling. "You didn't just hurt me, Alexander. You hurt us. Every time you hide, you remind me of the man you used to be, the one who didn't believe in love." He stepped closer, taking her trembling hands. "Then let me prove to you that I'm not that man anymore. Damian tried to destroy us, but he failed. I went public, I told the world the truth. That you're not my weakness, Emily, you're my strength." Her heart pounded. "You did that?" He nodded. "I told them I wasn't ashamed of loving you. Not now, not ever." Emily's tears finally fell, but this time they were of relief. He had done what she always wanted, faced the world with her, not for her. In the days that followed, the public began to see the truth. Damian was arrested for corporate fraud and extortion, and Alexander's reputation was restored. But more importantly, so was their love. Months later, Emily's postponed exhibition finally opened, not in a small hall, but in the grand atrium of Knight Enterprises. Every piece told their story: pain, trust, loss, and rebirth. At the center hung a painting of a man and woman standing in the rain, the night their love began. During her speech, Emily looked out at the crowd, then turned to Alexander. "They call him the cold CEO," she said with a smile, "but to me, he's the man who taught me that love is strongest when it's tested." Alexander walked onto the stage, took her hand, and whispered in front of everyone, "From a blind date to forever." Then he knelt, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Emily Reed, you melted my walls, healed my scars, and made me believe in something beyond power or control. Will you marry me?" The crowd gasped, cameras flashed, and Emily's tears sparkled in the lights. She whispered through her smile, "I already did, Alexander. The day I kissed you." They embraced as the audience applauded, the city lights glimmering behind them. Years later, they would tell their daughter the story of how her parents met, a blind date that became destiny, a kiss that changed everything, and a love that refused to break no matter how hard life tried. Final message: true love isn't about perfection. It's about endurance, choosing each other again and again, through silence, storms, and scars. Because when love is real, even destiny can't take it away.